This is going to be another episode of Snake and Banter. So I'm back with Mauisnake. In the other box is Dempz, who, if people don't know, is a HLTV.org writer. It's all right, put the pitchforks down. This is, in theory, one of the good ones, you know. Even in hell, some of the demons are probably cool. You know, I haven't been there personally, you know. Joke would be, you could probably finish the rest of the joke there and complete that with a symmetry, couldn't you, about the site I was talking about? No, if people don't know, right, we had Nero on a past episode. Here's how you need to break them down, guys. Nero is the guy who does like the stats interpretation pieces. Like, for example, he did that piece where I always make fun of him because all he actually did was, for real, plot a graph on an XY axis, but to show you morons how to conceptualize it, he drew islands around it like a map, and then you all wigged out and didn't understand it was a graph and thought he just chose who was on each island and said stuff like, why isn't the player in the bottom left on an island in the top right? So already, this is why it will always be a job in content creation esports about satisfying your own inner desires, because with that sort of an audience, I mean, who could really feel satisfied there? So if you don't know, Dempz didn't do that stuff. That's Nero. He does a bunch of written stuff as well. But for example, he did some of the top 20 articles. He actually wrote the one about nerds most recently. If you read that one, for example, obviously one of the players, maybe we'll talk about this episode, who knows? So Dempz, obviously we do operate Fight Club rules here, where since you are the new person, you have to bring the first topic. So what is your good topic? What do you want to bring to the table here?
Yeah, trial by fire. The good topic I wanted to bring was I wanted to talk about the race to be the #1 team, kind of, I guess, up until the Copenhagen Major. I think we've got a lot of teams who've obviously made changes, I think, for the better. I think Astralis are in a massively improved situation right now. Obviously, Vitality's still very good, having a bit of a wobble at Blast groups. I think Na'Vi look massively improved. I think Virtus.pro are always a good bet just to run good teams close, you know, in any game that they play. I think G2, look, they're never going to be super consistent, but they're going to be a team that has crazy peaks. And even Falcons, I know they're taking a little bit to ramp up, but they've got a fantastic lineup. I just think the battle for #1 team in the world could potentially be really fascinating at the start of this year. And I think in recent years, it's generally been a little bit boring. There's always been kind of a clear #1 team, and it's changed hands a few times. And you get purple patches, for example, like FaZe having their purple patch towards the end of last year. G2, Katowice, Cologne, obviously very good, not so good the rest of the year. I actually think we could have a genuinely fascinating battle where there's multiple teams that can win each tournament. And yeah, I just think it could be a really interesting time at the top of Counter-Strike.
Sure. What do you think, Maui?
It is a really interesting start to the beginning of the season. I feel like some of the teams that are let's look at Astralis, for example. They might be coming off of some really good prep work, and some of the teams that they're playing, say, for example, they took down Vitality in the groups. I imagine probably kind of having a little bit of a slower start for themselves. I do think that the CS we're seeing from some of the other teams you mentioned, though, has actually been good enough that it is going to make things a little bit more interesting. And I think I actually in general just like that you brought this point up, because it does seem like it's not going to be as clear cut as many would have first imagined, where you would have probably considered the S tier of teams to be just FaZe Clan and Vitality. And now it does seem like there's a few more teams that are entering the fray. So I'm not sure if I'm completely sold on, say, VP entirely yet, or some of the other rosters. Like, I noticed one team I don't think you brought up there was Liquid, for example, which we kind of hoped would be entering this race, but I feel like they've got a ways to go themselves. So, but overall, yeah, I think that right now it's a little bit more difficult to read. Once we get into Katowice and see the result of that, things might seem a little bit more clear in our eyes. But at the same time, it's very likely that with how these Blast groups have shaped up so far, that Katowice could have 1, maybe 2, 3 surprises in the playoffs.
Yes. I will say, just because everyone needs to be reminded of this, bearing in mind, if you noticed, Blast tends to be organised as the groups are always the first thing after a player break. It is, at this point in time, pretty notorious that there are always not just upsets, but bonkers upsets. Like, the amount of times the #1, #2, and #3 team in the world is just straight up lost a best of 3 on LAN because it's a Blast group is enormous. So, for example, I don't get too wigged out by either direction at Blast. I don't go and look at Falcons and go, oh, it's the end of the world, or go oh my God, game allegiance, the truth. Like, it's not enough games. And also, as we've seen in history, like EG Heroic's the best example ever. Like, you just get these crazy anomaly matchups. But if we're looking at the rosters and trying to project, I think it's, by the way, it's even a good time frame. If you think about how long away the major is, you finish Blast, you get a whole kind of 8 days of warm-up. Then basically, if you qualify for the RMRs, you get to go to the major. So I actually think with that run-up, the cool thing is every roster you just listed in theory has time to come online. They've got time to get it together or figure something out. It's not like it's the first event of the season. And so I actually think, yeah, here's the key thing. It's not Maui that like all the names he mentioned have to be at the top, but I would just frame it this way. Think of that discussion we had for the last like year and a half because of the dreaded G2 Huxley distraction, which was obviously that whole thing Richard brought up, which is people forget this. It wasn't just that Richard thought Huxley's like overrated in G2. It's that to him, them then winning events was like a symptom of the fact that CS wasn't at a high level. And by the way, if people don't get that, that's not even implying like Huxley's shit. It's like, if you see G2 win an event, it's not really like Prime Astralis, is it? Like, they really did just shoot people with the crosshair, and half the time they didn't even have any innovative strats or anything new in the smokes or whatever. So, like, basically, his whole premise was that just showed that the top tier, like, basically the teams were kind of meh who were on top and that were deciding the titles. Like, it was kind of like semi-washed phase. It was Vitality that hadn't got these players yet. It was kind of a whack scene, if people remember. That was when Outsiders won the major. That was it. That's all you need to know right there. Outsiders won a fucking major, and Furia was in the top, the semis. That's how bad CS was a year and a half ago, guys. So the difference is, I don't know what Richard thinks himself, but if I had to put myself in his shoes, this is the antidote right here. Look how fucking amazing that list of teams is. Like, the joke is you really can go like 7, 8 teams deep for like, you might be number one. And then even if Maui, they don't all make it, even if it becomes stratified, what a fucking strong top 10 this would be. Like, imagine a world where, I'll pick a random set. Imagine a world where we have like a top 4 that really can all win the event. And that is like Vitality, FaZe, I mean, pick 2. We'll say Astralis, G2, shall we? I'll just pick 2 random. It could have been Falcons, someone else there. Pick those 4. Then we'll say you have 4 dark horses. That could be like VP, Falcons, Na'Vi. Mate, at that point, you can still add in fucking Cloud9, Spirit, like, who else did I put? Liquid, like, dude, the top 10's a banger. Like, for real, you could actually have a team at like 9th or 10th that also could like fuck around and win the event. Like, if I'm putting Liquid down there, you don't have to have them as your 4th best team in the world, but surely you could see a world where this team just does well in one key semi-final and makes it run. So, no, I'm with you. I actually do think what people have got lost in is, because first of all, everyone thinks Vitality is going to win every event because CS fans are like this, guys. When someone starts winning, they think it's static and their brain just shifts and they'll do that. It's like with Ziwu. Dude, the joke is, half the Ziwu fans have already given him the next 5 years of number ones. I'm like, I don't think you haven't followed the game long enough. You think it's easy to get world number ones for a whole year. It's really hard, guys. So to bring it back, yeah, I would say that this actually probably the most exciting period, I think, in the post-online era. Like, otherwise, all we had was mega dominant teams and then like sort of a bit sus competition. Or that period where I actually think Richard, I said it before, I think Richard nailed it. That was the weakest period I've seen in many, many, many years. Like, the joke was you would have teams like the Vitality before they made these changes where they'd not only win, they'd go on like historic streaks. I'm sure you guys were tracking it on HLTV, but then you'd look and you'd put them side by side and you'd be like, bruh, they've got like the same number of wins as like prime 2018 Astralis. Like, and then I go in the server and it's like the eye test just does not check out on this at all. So I think even though people don't want him to be right, and I know the Huxley thing distracts people as a smokescreen, Richard was right about that. And I would hope he's as hyped as I am, because I agree. I was thinking like, oh, okay, maybe this Na'Vi move, if it works out, could be good. Or Falcons, that could, if they get the right work. No, dude, the joke is even some of the rosters I wasn't initially that hyped about. Like, it took me a while. I talked about some of the last episode. It took me a while with the Astralis one because actually, yeah, it doesn't make immediate sense why this lineup would work. But then you just keep looking at the players and you're like, actually, fuck it, run this experiment. Why not? Who doesn't want to see this? Like, even if it fails, you sort of want to see if this can work, right? So I actually do think, yeah. And the coolest angle, I'll throw it back to you guys if you have anything more, would be, I also think what I like is, if I run down all those rosters, here's the coolest part. They aren't all clones. They're not even all like super teams. You have a mix of every type of Counter-Strike. You have super teams that maybe don't have an IGL. You have teams like Falcons that look like they have the IGL in the structure, but not the super players. Like, it's fucking sick. VP has their super unique style. FaZe has it. Like, the actual styles and like matchups of Counter-Strike could be amazing. Because the last thing I would say is this. My dream always is, I like parity too, but I like parity when it's teams all at the high level. So the dream in this scenario is, when you think of all those squads, you could imagine that if you put all those names in a hat and draw out the major playoffs bracket, dude, you could make about 7 or 8 winners just on the bracket. Like, maybe there is a world where Na'Vi can't beat Vitality, but then like FaZe can beat Vitality and then Na'Vi can beat FaZe. And I could see this happening if you get enough teams cycling. That's also what makes it exciting, is like stylistic matchups make these upsets and make more the dreaded word diversity at the top, but the good diversity in it. So there you go. Anyone else have anything else on that one, or should we move on?
We can move on.
Yeah, all good. Right, Maui, what is your good point?
Yeah, mine is one guy that I feel like has been probably still lightly underappreciated, despite the fact that he's a major winner and was a huge contributing member of that major winning team, has sort of just gone under the radar. He's just not really become the household name that his skill actually, to me, has shown he could be, and that's Flit. I feel like Flit has now really come into his own, and I think my main point about what's good about Flit right now is that I do think that he probably has gotten a little bit better, but I think that the main thing is that now he's in the partner circuit, and that's really one of the things where he just like the thing with Flit and VP in the past year is that they just didn't really get into all the biggest events. They weren't part of the Blast partner circuit, so they didn't really get opportunities there. They didn't even really end up in the showdowns last year, and so Flit had just so many fewer opportunities than other people who I would say were probably around his skill level, maybe even worse, to just prove that he's one of the best riflers in the world. And so for me, Flit always has been one of the best Mirage riflers in the world. And I also feel like for VP in a lot of their winning efforts, he's been, practically speaking, it's kind of between him and Fame and Flit, or between him and Fame for trading blows for who's the best rifler on the team. I've always felt that Flit has had some of the harder jobs. Like, if you kind of watch the games, it just feels like Fame gets kind of some of the easier kills where he gets to come in a little bit later in the round, where Flit has to do a lot of sort of, I'm not going to say it's dry fights because VP always has some sort of structure to their openers, but he is taking a lot of opening duels now that there's no obvious entry star like Yakindar. And so for Flit, he's taking tough fights. He wins a lot of mid rounds for them too, which is getting multi-frags when he's just feeling out the round. And it's just that, really, I think that this is going to be a year for him that if I were to make a more bold claim here, I just think that it's clear that he's going to be a top 20 player on the HLTV list. And I feel like one of the only reasons he didn't is because he had so many less opportunities at big events. And so, yeah, last year his big event rating wasn't fantastic. It was, I think it was 1.07 or so, but it's that for Flit, he's now going to have more reps in those types of events where it's clear that over the course of more of them, I just think that his average is going to end up being much higher than it was last year.
Okay. What do you think, Dempz?
I agree completely. I think Flit is like an absolute baller of a player. The thing I love the most about Flit is when he first like kind of came into the tier 1 scene and got on VP or whatever, he was more of like this like weird aggressive half lurk type player where he was often on the extremities of the map or he was often not with his team, but he had the stones to actually like push and make plays, which I think particularly on VP, like outside of Yakindar, they've kind of struggled for somebody who would like make plays, who would actually like throw their life away. I even think watching other CIS teams like Spirit, like sometimes in the past have been a bit like that, where there isn't somebody who's willing to like go out and take space when it's not obvious what you should do. Like there's not an obvious flashbang or there's not an obvious gap. Like Flit is somebody who would go and make gaps. Whereas now, like Maui says, he's taking so many of their opening fights. He's taking like almost a third of their entries on T's side and winning like tons of them. He's now, since Yakindar disappeared, become this like can opener a lot of the time for Virtus.pro. He has a lot of high agency and like high responsibility positions on CT, and he like thrives in all of them. My one like counterpoint almost with Flit is, like you say, his big event rating is not always great. Doesn't get to play in the most, so understandable to some degree. But I just want to see him do it a little bit more against like really good teams. And like you say, he's going to get more chances to now. But like a lot of what he does sometimes is make like, you know, borderline tier 1, tier 2 teams or just tier 2 teams. He makes them look stupid because he's like a class above them for sure. I wouldn't be confident in saying he's going to be a top 20 player just because I need to see him do it a little bit more against like the very best teams, which he's going to get the chance to hopefully this year. But I agree. I think he's a sick player and I'm really looking forward to seeing him play more top teams and top events this year for sure.
Yeah, the thing I would say is, to me, I even think, off the top of my head, Maui, this even feels like something that was a take on like a hot take point made. I think wasn't there a take like Flip will be like a top 20 player or something in VP? I'm sure there was some take like that at one episode, because the premise is like, it just seemed so obvious. If you saw when he joined, even way back when we had that PGL Stockholm Major, people forget that was when he came in the team, and he's been there the whole time. This is how you know there's certain teams where like the rep and what people talk about on Reddit or Twitter just dominates people's consciousness about a team, because this guy's never talked about. He's like a fucking sleeper. The joke is all the like Jame memes just draw all conversation about this team away, because the thing I always hate, that I always stress on these shows, is these teams aren't even like the older Vanguard, Virtus.pro, Jame teams you're thinking of, guys. Like those teams were quite limited in terms of like firepower. They clearly had to actually play that gimmick style to get any like value out of the gear. Now the joke is like, first of all, Jame himself's just actually a very good IGL and a pretty solid AWPer. And then also, even though he warps their style, the rest of them fit in the system and actually really good. Like as Maui says, like the joke is Fame also, by the way, has won a fucking major as a rifler. We just don't even talk about him ever in these. Like people spend more time wanking off over what Donk hasn't done than talking about what Fame and Flit have done at fucking majors. Like, by the way, they've also been like top 8. You not remember that one, guys? Like they're all, remember when they first joined with Flit, he had the top 8 run at fucking Stockholm. Like these guys have done so much more than their rep carries. And so, yeah, I actually do think he's a sleeper. And to me, he's an obvious player that would always be like borderline to be on the HLTV top 20. His problem is, if you know the way the system works, he doesn't attend enough big events. So he's not going to get the EVP, which means then he's not going to be the one who gets the, if you don't know, that's like one of the deciding factors. If all things are close and obviously they don't have time to watch every fucking demo, they're going to go off things like, right, well, this other guy had 5 EVPs. And so the problem someone like Flit had is, this is why Maui's right, it's so key they got into that partner system. VP is the ultimate example I've seen that made me realise that the Blast partner system was fucking Counter-Strike. Not in Blast's case, they're totally fine to run the tournament however they want, but because if you didn't attend that, it basically meant if you ever fuck up one kind of 8 circle alone, you're just toast. You're not going to have the ranking, therefore you're not going to get the invite, and therefore, and then it just gets worse, because then you're in the plane, and then in the plane, you better pray that you don't get like some other ridiculous tip, like maybe Spirit plays you in the first round of the plane, and then the second one, maybe it's like Furia or something. So people don't know what a nightmare that there actually is in Counter-Strike because of the Blast part. There almost was like an Elo hell point where you could get to a point where it just became so progressively hard to sort of get a normal spot that it meant, unfortunately, the knock-on is we do judge things like where you are over the end of the year as an individual player, unfortunately, based on what access your team had to tournaments. So in his case, he didn't have it. That's why I actually think the topic's good for today, because he has it now. In theory, this is the year where if he is indeed this player, he will prove it. And the last thing I'll throw out there is this. This is actually another player where low-key, you have to give mad credit to Blade's Eye. Because people always forget this, and I always bring this up. Everyone forgets this was actually the player in early 2020, I think it was instead of Perfecto, that Na'Vi was going to sign. They were going to sign Flit from Forza. It was even an official like story, like they made a request, they want to talk to him and have a transfer. And at the time, by the way, I'm pretty sure everyone did what I did, like, Flit though, like if you'd ever watched Forza back then, it was like Jerry as IGL, everyone used to wank off over Exapower as the AWPer, and that was about it. The rest of them were just sort of like, all right players. Like you actually, if you went to watch this, you wouldn't see the guy who plays now. Blade just must have some fucking unbelievable eye, or he just knows something about the scene, because this was the player. The joke is he had actually picked the right player in the same way as he then picked for Vector. This guy just has a fucking sick eye. And so I'm with you. Look, I don't think he'll ever be like a top 10 player in the world, but like he could be on the outskirts of that. Because the key thing I think is, one, he is, in my opinion, after Jim, the most important player in this team. I'm with you on that, Maui. I think people actually just look at the rating for Fame and get distracted. If you watch how they play in the game, they wouldn't have a T-side without this guy. They'd have a way, way harder time. And then also, I actually think his game's pretty fucking consistent, actually. So, yeah, it seems like he's actually figured his game out. He's also not a young player. People don't read this, how many years this guy's now played. So, actually, basically, he is the finished product for me. It's just he has to get to enough tournaments where we can see what does that equate to. So, yeah, I think it's a pretty cool angle.
It really screwed their last year that the one major, they had that weird situation where it was like Chiron in, Norbert out, and it just ruined their chances of actually making it to one of the other big events where they would have had a really strong opportunity to actually make a deep run. But it's kind of, I don't want the good point to be about Norbert, but actually he is good enough now that actually I think that their team is more complete, and I think that's also a big reason why Flit's going to have these deeper runs, can collect some EVPs, because they just had a weird fifth situation, and now it's like, okay, they trust Norbert, and Norbert's actually pretty good.
I mean, the joke is obviously Norbert was on the Indiana Jones style quest with JT to find the fucking Holy Grail, which like restored their Counter-Strike abilities in CS2 only in exchange for their ever-loving souls. Because fuck that, those two players alone are the weird ones where like everyone else is like, everyone else it's like really you just ask behind the scenes and you find out, oh, that guy didn't play the game or he doesn't like the AWP or something. These are the ones where like it just doesn't even make any sense. Some of the games they've had, like you're actually right. I have to actually like remove my preconceptions from CS:GO and just actually if I take the nameplate off, he's fine. Actually, there's no problem with Norbert Maui. The problem is, one, he still just has one of the most whack names of all time. By the way, I'll never understand why you picked that name. That actually might be objectively the worst name ever for someone in esports. Come on.
I don't know. That guy who's got the Steam Guard code as his name.
Oh, that's pretty up there too.
That's pretty bad
True.
one as well.
That's pretty up there. True.
Like, come on, when we were all kids, we all put like numbers in our name and shit to look cool. So I can let Norbert off. Okay. I can let Norbert off. He backed himself. He stuck with it. Respect to him.
Thing is, though, I would actually disrespect him so much if he actually told me he was a fan of that movie, though. If he actually told me, Maui, that, like, when I was a boy, I saw this movie. It made me dream of America, the American Dream. Norbit, it was called. Like,
that's not the Eddie Murphy movie,
yeah.
is it?
It's it's famously one of the ones where, like, that's where, he just was saying yes to every check. It's like, because he said yes to Norbit.
Any bag. Exactly. Any bag.
Exactly. Right, okay. My good point is this. Basically, let me think how to say this. All right, here's the best way to say it. Even though everyone else who works in Counter-Strike has to pretend like, oh, this is awesome. I don't have to fuck around, guys. I'm ready for CS2 to begin now. Because, by the way, Katowice is when CS2 begins. I know you all thought it was going on. No. This period now, understand, fittingly was the NIP 87 and 0 period. Because, everyone mentions that. But everyone doesn't know it was only like the first 7-8 months or something. It wasn't even, by the way, there wasn't even loads of the tournaments and players you all think of. Like, if people think of those teams that came along, like Dorsey with Virtus.pro, well, they're the ones who stopped the 87 and 0. If you think about like Pimp and Glaive on Western World, that was like right at the end of the 87 and 0. Like, look, after that, they continued winning on and they were still a great team and they won one of the majors. But that first period, no one really counts. Everyone counts once the majors come, and that's when they think the game is. So for me, IM Sydney, that would be considered like the fucking 8th biggest event of the year if this was CS:GO. That would never be like an enormous event. Keep going. CS2 Asia Championship wouldn't even be considered a relevant top event, by the way. That'd be more like a medium-sized event. Obviously, this gives you away how bad CS2 was. Everyone just went ahead and counted an online tournament to people's like streaks and stuff. That's how you know you're all desperate, because beggars can't be choosers. So you just accepted that an online, some of you even had the goal to actually call it the World Championship because they called it that as well. Like, I never understand what World Championship or an online cup, but okay, you're all just fine with that one at this point in time. And then obviously after that, we just had the 2 blasts, which as Kassad has gone to pains to point out, are banana cups. By the way, random thing for you here, Maui. There are actually people so stupid, they don't know that when Kassad calls blast a banana cup, it's a comment about like he doesn't like the blast structure and it's not big enough event. They think he's just saying any event Huxley wins becomes a banana cup because Huxley and G2 suck or something. It's like one of the things I've always loved about morons is there's that great Bertrand Russell quote that basically says like, you can't trust the report of a stupid man on what an intelligent man said, because a stupid man has to make what the intelligent man said make sense to his mind before he can repeat it, essentially. That's what you find with comments like that. It's just like, mate, this is a travesty, but I didn't say any of that. So I don't know where this went lost in your brain that it came out like that. So yeah, I actually think that's the big thing for me is like, I haven't been someone who's dissed CS2 heavily. I've watched the tournaments, I've followed it along, but it never felt like it properly started to me. It's why actually all those first events also having like top teams having standings wasn't the end of the world. It did suck at the event. You'd be like, oh, I wanted to see Mouse, I wanted to see Jens, but it didn't even feel that big a deal, guys. And also notice none of us really do want a bunch of people fired because of the first few months of not being that good at CS2. None of us really feel like it counts. So to me, Katowice is the first real event, then we have the major, and then we're going. At that point, we're rolling. And you know what? As much as I actually do hate for history that there wasn't a major last year, by the way, if you have someone like a Ziwu fan, you should be even more mad there's no majors. That would be right in his fucking prime where he could have won the shit and gone back to back. But in a way, I can see from the Valve side, there's a logic to it, which is like the game was way more fucking janky when it first came out. And there is a world where that CS2 major might now be like infamous with all problems and all fucked up results. And I mean, the joke is like, if Complexity had been in the finals, you'd have all wanted fucking CS cancelled, wouldn't you? There's a world. It's JT versus Norbert for the first major of CS2 here, Maui. And we got Maui and Pimp on the mic. Everyone's dream set up for CS2. Welcome to the next turn. It's the way Pimp's. I like the way Pimp's become my new Dust, because Dust's not in the scene anymore. My new whipping boy that I just throw into any equation to make it funnier. Then there's Pimp. He's just in there too, laughing at him, everyone. What do you think, guys? Am I being too harsh? You think these first tournaments count to you? I'm an elitist. I only like the top Counter-Strike to me personally, boys.
I personally think they count because like there is something to be said for being the team that adapts quickest to the new game, right? So for example, I think it's really cool that Rop's got his props for being that guy who's like a fucking mega nerd about the game, and he will like push it to its limits and find every little edge and advantage that he can. And if you're not like working as hard as him, or you're not just as like intelligent about the game as him, then you're fucked for the first few months. Like that guy is going to know smokes you don't. He's going to know how to play around these new smokes. He's going to know which angles are more favorable now. And I think that's really cool that FaZe and, you know, by extension, Rop's really got their props for that. But I agree with you. Like, it wasn't the scene really, was it? Because like we knew loads of teams were going to be looking for upgrades and changes with CS2 on the horizon. We knew with no major, teams are going to shrug their shoulders and say, well, who gives a fuck? Like, because the major is the most important thing by so far. So yeah, it wasn't proper, was it? Like, it's still an era of Counter-Strike history, and I will still like think fondly upon like Rops and FaZe doing their cool little run. I'll still like think it was cool that Zywoo, like, you know, had a shit first CS2 event and then was like, no, I can play this game. But yeah, it wasn't real super competitive prime era of the scene.
By the way, did you guys see that one the other day that Monacy found on Vertigo, where he found Maui, he found like a fucking wall bang that's one of those like insane architecture ones where it really does go through like the whole map through like a sliver like that into a guy like on the other bomb site like coming up. And it, like, I won't lie, it would be the most insane way to die in the game, but when you see this clip, the first two thoughts I have is, one, who the fuck's ever going to use that in a game? And then two, how are you finding that out? Because that's the first thing I think, Dempz, like, how many hours were you in this server? Because like essentially, like, it does need to be fixed, but it's like, that's not really top priority, is it? Like, it's like such an insane angle as well. Like, I don't even know how you'd time to shoot it, but it just would technically kill you on the other side of the map. It was a perfect example of what you're talking about, Dempz, how these guys go super nerd, tunnel vision on that shit.
This is why you don't want a major, because people will find that shit. People will put that shit in their back pockets and wait for the major, and then they'll crack it out in like a, you know, really important game. And that's when, you know, everyone's like, oh my God, like the game's brought into disrepute, CS2 shit. Like,
Shout out Olfmeister.
Big ups Olofmeister. Olof Boost, what a fucking legend. But yeah, you don't want shit like that happening, because it just like, it ruins the whole like prestige of the major and stuff. So I think it was a really good idea to not have a major, because Rops or Monacy or someone would have done some absolute bullshit and everyone would have been mad. So I think it was the right idea as well not to have a major for a while.
By the way, in my unending tradition of incredibly incendiary, hot take, contrarian positions, I will to this day maintain I think the Olaf Pass booth was good. It's good for everyone. All right, maybe not LDLC. I'll give you that. I'll give you that aspect. But as I'll always say, and I'll just say this one last detail for anyone who never looked into it. All I'll say is they literally tried to do a similar boost. Theirs just wasn't as good. And so somehow, I don't know why that makes Fnatic evil. I've never understood that part. That's the part that everyone leaves out that story, you'll notice. Right, okay. Let's go on then. So obviously, you did your thoughts. Okay, go on.
It's just the way that your point coincides with Demps's that everybody's peaking at this exact same time is just kind of like the perfect storm for getting the most competitive version of CS2 in the esports space right now. I mean, I don't really have too much more to add other than that one though.
Okay, right. What is your bad point going to be then, Dempz?
My bad point, and I'm interested to see the response I get for this one, is I am so sick of watching Krimbo and tabseN just like waste away basically on big. Like, tabseN is so good. Like, he's actually such an insane player. I don't think some people appreciate. tabseN literally sits there on big right now, and he is microing the whole team. He is literally like, you go here, you do this, you do that, and then this is how we're going to win the round. And he still manages to like frag out as well and post like 1.25 ratings or whatever. Could easily have gone to like an international project and led it and been like, or just not even leading. Could have just gone and been a baller player on an international project. Krimbo, same thing. Apparently he had some like interest from Vitality when they were looking around. Like Krimbo on Maus, I think instead of Brolan would have been an absolute banger. I just this big team, man, like what are we doing? Like what is even the concept at this point? We're not fully German, so that like cool storyline of like, oh, we're carrying the scene on our back is a little bit tainted by having Mantu on the team. when they brought Mantu on, I was like, okay, so are we like priming to go international? Are we like, get Mantu now, 6 months or whatever, the academy shitters, and then we'll go and fucking like get someone good? But no, and I don't know what we're doing with Big anymore. I really don't know what we're doing. Like, what's the point? Where is it going?
I would say that my point on this, as someone that seems to have to defend Big for whatever reason, I painted myself into this corner when I made a prediction about Big 2 years ago that I just am now tasked with defending this roster and everything they do forever. And
I mean, you could just double down. You could just say, yeah, I agree with you guys now. That is an option at all times.
I've like quadrupled down on this team at this point. Yeah, like I will just keep defending them because I just find it's just yeah, exactly. It's my angle. Also, like full disclosure, their org is just really nice to me. They're just really they just give me stuff now. So like I can't. It's hard for me to like really. That's kind of an angle. But I will say this. And
by the way, the joke there, Maui, is that actually you have the same flaw I do. It's just no one ever exploits it. We are actually susceptible to flattery, but since the default approach of everyone is to insult us, it doesn't work, you idiots. Like, you actually could win us over, with the right fucking, with a bit of bedside manner, charm,
Unfortunately, I can be bought out with these. It's just, yeah. So with Big and Taps, I'll start first with tabseN and Krimbo's decision. I don't think that I have ever heard once, and like again, the full disclosure had to be said earlier. I've never heard once any person leaving Big and saying, "God, what a terribly run organization. This is an organization that maybe they don't pay the most of anyone, but behind the scenes, it feels like everybody is incredibly comfortable and satisfied for at least playing for them. So if you're signing a long-term deal and you're somebody like tabseN or Krimbo, I do feel like they're in very good hands and they're very comfortable doing that. And if they weren't, then they probably would have looked for other offers, and that's why they just signed for those. I think like Krimbo re-upped his deal, and tabseN definitely did it for a couple more years as well. And so it's that if you are in good hands and you have the chance to just extend your life with this org, it does feel like a lot of the little bits and bobs are taken care of. So that's kind of my angle on that. Also, I will say that it's just kind of unfortunate, but I think the reality of the situation is that when we look at certain orgs, like, for example, ENCE as well, along with Big, you don't necessarily think with their spending habits that they're supposed to be a championship caliber team. They're a team that's trying to make inroads to the esports space with a roster that's a little bit more sustainable in terms of budget, and one where they're definitely relying on partner system, media rights, sponsorships to just try to make things a net positive for them overall, and kind of just run an honest business. And so it's not one where they're shooting for the moon necessarily, but they're just trying to keep themselves afloat enough in a way that they're satisfying sponsorship obligations. They're making sure that their players are getting paid a comfortable enough amount that they're going to also stay loyal to them too. And so it's just kind of a team where, unfortunately, the objective to me is yes, it's play the best you absolutely can and do as well as you can, but with much more limited resources. And so it almost kind of makes a team like Big look bad when an ENCE, who's probably working on a very similar amount of budget, is then suddenly competing for trophies, because these teams, frankly, probably weren't spending to actually even do that. The right constellation was found of players that was able to elevate them well beyond probably the sum of their parts. So that's kind of where I'm at with Big. And I will say, like, I can be critical of this team too. I do think that Sin has been so ridiculously error prone as a player. It's infuriated me when I've watched Big, because I see the efforts that tabseN, Krimbo, and Montu have been putting in lately. And Montu's game in the last couple days as of recording this has been unreal. Montu has just hard carried in some of these games. Versus Cloud9, he just decimated Cloud9. So I'm starting to finally see a Montu that, to me before, was very much like, he's kind of like a run-of-the-mill, maybe lightly above average tier 1 upper, to being a guy that now seemingly can take over games. And I feel like Big has really enabled him. They've talked about the fact that Montu himself has really taken the onus in a lot of the responsibility, just calling his own number. And I do see what you say, Dempz, of like, you've lost this identity, but weirdly enough, this Montu signing is kind of panning out for them, at least in this very short term that I'm getting, in terms of what they were doing online at the end of 2023 and what they're now bringing to the Blast Spring groups. Who knows if they're actually going to make it to London and the spring finals, because they still got another tough opponent ahead of them in VP. But I do think, like, this is kind of, in almost in some ways, now that they beat Cloud9, I'm kind of like, wait a second, does this team actually have legs? Is this team gonna like surprise me with the tactical level of play? And you're right. tabseN he's getting so emotional over this because he is putting everything in this team. Like he is like yelling more in terms of excitement and anger than I have seen him in a long time. He's been so centered before as an individual, but now it's like he knows that he has kind of made his own bed now, and he's just forced to sleep in it. So he's just calling everybody out if they're fucking up.
I'll tie this into the point I made earlier about like how the first point about the parity of the scene at the top now and how many top squads are. That's also why this big project just feels like a waste of time, because these guys were only making those top 10 runs and runs to like number 5, number 6, number 7 sort of rankings because of how weak the scene was. And you really could just qualify to a major. They always used to dominate those RMRs, make it out the first Swiss, and then do like, I don't know, a fucking 9th place at Cologne or something. If you did that, that basically could like sneak you into a cheeky like 8th position. It looked like, oh, you're mixing it up, but it's just because the scene was weak. If you look right now, that murderer's row of names I listed earlier, where we could go like 9, 10 league. The Big doesn't even get on that list, so you're already in real bad shape there. You'd have to essentially, all those rosters would have to be worse, or you have to be much better than expected. And then also the other reason it's a waste of time is, and this can be tied directly to the tabseN issue, because obviously he's the criminal offender of this, is what people don't get is people will know I'm one of the main people who thinks it is just a waste of his talent for him to play in this team, and that he actually should at some point. Look, I've always said this. It's not like it's binary. He's had such a long career now. He could have gone and done it for fucking 2 years and come back. The joke is he could actually have gone in like 2017, been in like FaZe Clan, won a bunch of shit, won a major, come back and now had 3 years in big as this IGL. Like, I don't know why you couldn't just do both personally. People are acting like he has to commit and like, like fucking go into the wilderness for 40 years and never come back. No, it's okay. You could go and try it in the same ways. If this doesn't work out, you could go and try it. The problem now is obviously the window's closing, and the worst thing is he's still really good, but that can't last forever, guys, especially if he keeps being an IGL and putting all this like wear and tear on his shoulders. So the problem I have is I wouldn't have minded the whole angle of like, but he wants to like make Germany essentially relevant in Counter-Strike if it was plausible. That's the part that kills me, because one, I have to say, a lot of the people who got added to Big the last couple of years, you'll notice are like legendary figures from German Counter-Strike who used to be like mouse sports players. Well, here's the problem those guys have. I actually think it's the same problem all these Swedish people have in CS now. They can't accept that it's not their day anymore. Back in the day, the joke was you really could just go to like a semi-pro Swedish LAN and you would find 3 players playing in a team you've never heard of who in like 2 years would be essentially like top 10 players in the world. And there'll be an SK and Fnatic and they'll be battling for... That doesn't exist not only in Sweden, but in Germany, that is gone completely. In Germany, they still have it to this day, by the way. They have one of the best domestic circuits ever. The EPS system is mega. They have loads of tons. There's loads of money as well. If no one ever goes and looks, look how much money you win each season for these things, guys. The joke is you can actually be like in the 5th best German team and have like a real salary and a pro career. It's just that people on these shows, we aren't watching you, so we won't know you're pro, but you actually will have had a whole career. So the problem is it's not that like no one's developed German talent. I'm sorry, there just isn't any, I'm afraid. I mean, they've come through, and some of them, by the way, have been the ones that Big have tried. It's why they've cycled the roster. Like, by the way, this Sin guy was supposed to be the truth. They promised us this guy was the guy, actually, like you're saying, Dempz, who would take the IGL from tabseN. He'd do it so well himself that then tabseN would be unleashed to be like a top 15 player. And then the idea was if Krimbo was good, we're cooking with gas. There we go. The problem is the Sin angle never worked. They even just took the fucking IGL straight off him, and well, they obviously didn't believe in that. And then now he's just like a bad player in the team. Elsewhere, I'm actually with you on the Mantu one. Mantu's problem is we all just saw him in the online era on OG, which was like his first real like pro team, and it was like he was just a bit limited as a player. I do think if you look, I'm with you, Murray. He's expanded his game a bit. He definitely has. He hasn't just been sat on his fingers. He's come forwards a bit, and he actually looks solid now. The real problem is this. I would summarize Big like this. It is just a prison for Krimbo and tabseN. And the reason I say this is Mantu is good, but he's not good enough to like make this team suddenly beat all those massive squads I mentioned earlier. If you actually did have that, here's the real irony of this team. Is they could never get all the fucking Venn diagram to overlap. If you could have had Krimbo like this and tabseN like this and old Sirison, now you'd have a teammate. Those 3 players could be enough. You'd have your star rifler, your star fucking IGL, and the star AWP. That would be banging. The problem in this team is there's not quite enough to make it like a legendary team. Like actually, I'll compare it to the old Ents. The Finnish Ents, everyone famously always said they should make roster moves, right? Depending on which angle you want. Obviously, no one wanted Alexi B out. Famously, it was Ariel. Everyone used to say that would kicked Or if you're a noob, you said X7 because you don't know roles in the game, right? The reason why, though, is because obviously that wasn't a high production firepower team, was it? But as you saw, the second you took any player off that team, the whole fucking like chemistry just evaporated. It's like it just left. It wasn't even that one player had it. There's something about those mix. So the real problem I'll get to is this. That's how you've got to win if you don't have the actual like player strength. You've got to have like some canny squad that just fits together in some like old Virtus.pro. They've got to have some gimmicky style that they can all play into, and you kind of like you're more than the sum of your parts. Every big lineup the last 2 years has been less than some of their parts. Because actually, I'll end on the Krimbo one. That actually is the biggest travesty, is if you only look at this guy as German player in the German scene, therefore he should be on big. No. Guys, think of all the teams now that this guy could be on. He could be on Maus, like you say. By the way, bear in mind, they actually do speak it. Why couldn't he be on NIP? Isn't NIP a team that this guy could be good on? How about fucking Ents themselves? Ents, in theory, isn't really a Polish team, guys. They need actual, like, proper players. How about fucking Falcons? Couldn't this guy be in Boris's spot? Like, the joke is, actually, he might be about to go down his own tabseN style fucking road where he just wastes his time playing on big. And at the end of it all, like, I agree with you, Maui. The real secret sauce in this that will never make sense to a fan is supposedly, a part of it really is that, like, it's not just a meme. They really have in that org made people feel like it's a family environment. And that has had, like, an extra effect. In the same way as in football, if you are like a Liverpool player and you come from Liverpool, you are going to be way more likely to stay at Liverpool than to take that Real Madrid offer if it's super sick, aren't you? Because you have an extra reason to care about the club. So normally that's a meme. Like you've seen in Heroic, by the way, spoiler, they weren't all best friends doing it by the power of friendship. Secretly, the joke is, none of you have even thought this through. You do know, like, about the last 5 of those huddles you all watched, like, oh my God, Cadian's giving like an incredible speech. They're inside their heads going, fuck, I wish I could be in Israel's without this cunt. But you never thought that one, did you, fans? So I'll just plant that little seed, yeah, you absolute marks. The difference is, in big, I actually believe it, mate. I've talked to enough people, it is real. They actually have got some sort of, like, they're all, essentially, it's on, in a good way, it's like a cult, and in a bad way, it's like a cult. Because they're also going to be there when fucking tabseN passes out the fucking Flintstone vitamins and tells everyone to take a big swig of orange juice, if you get the analogy there. So, yeah, I just think it's sad for both, because tabseN's wasted his time. He really could have been a much greater player. And I actually do get the vibe, like, if they keep doing this for the next 2 years, the Krimbo guy's ready. He's ready to be on these top teams now. Like, it's not even like when Maui first talked about when he came to the line, he had potential. He's done it on LAN. If you go and watch, I know no one watches big play, but if you ever watch their games, he's actually really good. It's not just potential, he's got it already. So I'm with you. The big travesty to me essentially would be if he just also stays like tabseN and does 5 years in big clan or whatever. Like, I hope it's like, do 1 more year, and then when it doesn't work out, mate, just fucking go to the other team. Like I said, you can come back. You can come back and be the hero in 3 years and playing big when you're not as good. You don't have to waste your prime, though. Because I think that is tragic. Sad.
Krimbo's one of the best clutches in the world. And yeah, like what? I mean, yeah, you're going to get in a lot of clutch situations on big because Sin is going to fuck the round up and you're going to be stuck in that 1v2. But like, come on, man. He's so good. He's so good. Can we see him on Maus or Vitality or Ents or someone, please?
Yes. And obviously, this is where it's sad I'm not on desks anymore, boys. Because understand, I absolutely would have worked in some sort of inappropriate crowbarred pun about Berlin being the Sin City of Europe, and so that's fucking straight fire there. I could work in a whole historical element or whatever. But anyway, whatever. That's all good. Weimar, all that shit. Right, let's move on then. Maui, what is your bad point? What's hilarious about this, by the way, is this is like a mad on-brand point. But come on, hit me. What could your bad point be, Maui? Hit me with it.
Yeah, just there's so like, people always talk about a few teams for like the battle of mid or just who's really bad and you have to keep watching them and stuff. And I think that it's kind of fun that now there's no just obviously worse team that's in Blast and in ESL as a partner team because EG is gone, thankfully. But now I feel like there's a few that are swirling around, and one that I just really have a hard time watching. In fact, I just can't stand watching them, truthfully, is NIP. This team,
by the way, isn't NIP just that meme of like, oh my, fuck NIP, all my homies hit NIP? No one likes NIP, do they? Does anyone actually like this team? I don't. I even like most of the players. I still despise this team.
Yeah, no. This is like one of the worst arrangements of players you could possibly ask for. It's like, and there's really, to me, the crazy thing about this is that even though we just talked about big and some of the ways that it's frustrating because tabseN and Krimbo are in jail on this team, I don't think there's really anybody in jail on this team. I don't think anybody,
Sure.
truthfully, really deserves any better than what they're getting on this team.
The analogy for them, Maui, is they might actually be like institutionalized, where if you let them go to a normal team, they might not be able to live outside of the NIP prison system. They'd be like the guy, guarding his cornbread, and it's like, whoa, you're at home now. It's okay. No one's going to steal it. It's like, oh, okay, I don't know. Like, I can't live in the normal world anymore after being in NIP for too long.
It's just like I wrote a tweet about this team that it was just that I thought I was kind of saying at the time, and maybe I was being even too nice on it, is that you look at this team and some of the names on paper, and you're like, maybe if that's your third to fifth best player, you could do something. But the thing is, none of these players are first options. Like, you would never ever want to look at any of these guys and be like, this is my best player on a team. And also the thing is, it's like, NIP themselves as an org have done so much. They've wronged so many players with contract disputes and just kind of seemingly not really, like, nothing in PayPal being the obvious joke there is that. And so in some ways we don't even really love the storied brand. Like, at least I think some people hold Fnatic a little bit dearer to their heart than a team like NIP and just kind of the legacy there. But yeah, with NIP, there's just they've been dragged through the mud in terms of their reputation and name as an organization. The Jonas Gunnarsson guy does not do himself any favors on social media whatsoever either. And then in terms of the personnel on this team, I just don't even really understand how Alex is even really much of an upgrade over Hampus. Threat cited himself that they wanted to look for leadership, or they wanted to change out the leadership, and then they take out Hampus and they bring out Alex. These mid rounds are absolutely atrocious when I watch this team. The way that they like to structure themselves after getting some sort of map control is just seemingly so wrong in terms of the macro level. On top of that, some of the smokes that they throw on certain maps are legitimately outdated now. When I watch other teams throw, for example, Anubis smokes for control, there's this one that people have been throwing a lot more to take that E-box or dark space, the kind of like short B by canal water area. And there's one that's a little bit deeper that people are throwing that lands through the roof. NIP are still throwing this old one that's kind of more at the mouth of it, and it doesn't allow you the same amount of options that the new one does, because you can kind of creep around this new one. It's kind of like harder for the CTs to play around. So one, it's like they're not even seemingly scouting for better utility as well as other teams. They don't have as good mid-rounding as other teams. They don't have as good personnel as other teams. And it's just like this horrible checklist of garbage that nothing on this team is compelling in any facet. And I think that the one bad narrative that's for whatever reason surrounded this team was like, ooh, save Hetrick. If you watch the games, Hetrick is just such a save-prone opper. He just wants to get out of fights so frequently. He doesn't really take too many risks for himself. In fact, I actually think Hetrick is a much better rifler than he is opper, and this is something that I've been kind of perpetually saying, because when he was playing in the We Play Academy League and had his first couple seasons, he was a rifler, and then they kind of forced it. They did, for whatever reason, on Navi Jr., he became the opper when m0NESY left, and then he suddenly just got picked up by NIP, and I feel like everybody else was looking around like, you do know this guy only opt for a single season in an academy league, and you're picking him up to be your new m0NESY signing. And it's like they're the one team, an org, that had like wool over their eyes because they didn't properly scout this guy. He's not actually putting himself into all the right fights and engagements that he should. And his rating at the end of the day might look good, but if you actually watch the demos, he's one of the most static oppers I've ever seen. And if anything goes wrong in the round, he's just gonna hightail it out of there, and he's just gonna save for his rating. So, and I don't even necessarily think that's his fault. I feel like, if anything, Navi Jr. were the ones that somehow just knew this guy was really mechanically talented against academy level players. He's gonna farm them, and he did, and then they just sold him for a really big buyout. So it's kind of like Navi's just waving in the distance as they're riding to the bank.
Come on then, Dempz. Anywhere you want on that one. He'd give you a million off ramps.
Okay, I've got to get something off my chest now that I have a platform to do it. Can I stop hearing casters talk about config like it's 2017? Brother, why is Henry G sat here telling me that this guy's some mega monster star carry? He does it once every like 40 maps. He'll have like an old school config game, and it'll be against some shitters anyway, and you'll be like, wicked config. No, he's not back, guys. We know he's a known quantity at this point. His decision making is fucking awful. Yes, he's pretty mechanically gifted, fair enough. And when he's on, he will pop heads. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like config's completely worthless, but like, can we stop pretending he's like Nico or something? Like, that was 2017, man. When yes, on Dignitas or like North or whatever, yeah, he looked really good. Didn't pan out, did it? It didn't pan out. And now I'm sat here and it's like Henry G and Anders are trying to tell me that config's going to take over. come on. It's not happening. Like Maui said, like, yeah, if he's your third best player, okay, maybe we can like cook with something here. Like, you know, yeah, he can give us the odd game. Nah, I'm so like, yeah, I'm sold out on this fucking Nip team. Like, it's a waste of time.
Yeah, I also think that the joke, like I said, is like, is there anyone who's a fan of Nip? I don't think I know any. By the way, I don't know anyone in broadcast or experts who even like, they don't even like jokingly like Maui do like a thing of like, I used to like Big before, so I'll sort of make a kid. No one even does that. Everyone's just out on this team. They actually, in fact, most people I will say just act like it doesn't exist until like you get to a tournament like this and you remember, oh shit, it's Nip, yeah. You just don't, they're not even a team. Like, notice, by the way, I threw them in there just to show that like Krimbo has that many options. That wouldn't have been a good one. I'd have taken the mouse one out of that one. Any of the other options I give would be better than the Nip one, because there's two ways you can look at the Nip roster construction. Do you want to start at the top with the big names, or shall I start at the bottom with the structure? Spoiler, neither side works. So if I start at the top, my star players are literally meant to be res and fucking config. Like, again, the joke there, Dempsey, is that's literally a 2017 fucking star player.
Yeah, 2017 MVPs, man.
And then, because as you say, like, Headtrick has never even tried to play like a Monacy or something like that, even though he was obviously sold that way. Like, the joke is like, we've got Monacy at home, and it's the Headtrick instead of fucking Monacy, isn't it? Like, and then if you go the other way, like I say, you can have a team that like makes it off like structure and be awesome. So let's go to the bottom. The structure is Alex and Essetag. Right, not the good Alex, the UK one that did. No, the Alex from fucking Movistar Riders, the team which I've always told people, this is how you know people just get fucking fleeced by narratives in esports. Because if you were going to buy players from Movistar Riders, believe it or not, I'm in. But it goes like this. Do you need an AWPer? Get Sun Pius. Do you want like an entry player with some initiative? Get Mopos. I'm going to get the IGL. Why are you getting the IGL, you idiot? That's the one guy in the team that I wouldn't take, you moron. Did you just hear what I said? There's a guy who just did Randy plays that made the whole T-side work, and then on CT side, a guy shot everyone with the AWP. Like, you've gone, is there anyone sat near them, though, watching that I could sign and pay? Like, I don't get it, mate. You don't have those players. It doesn't even make sense. So the Alex one makes up. And then you've added Essetag. Again, what year is this? If this is 2 years ago, I've always thought Essetag was a pretty good fill player. He is actually one of the worst fraggers in professional Counter-Strike right now. You can go watch a game, even though he might still try. I'm sure he probably still has smarts and comms and stuff. He has actually got to the point now, guys, where he's like worse at fragging than some of the low fragging IGLs, and he isn't your IGL, and Alex is your IGL. So add all this together, like, you've got stars who aren't stars because it isn't 6 years ago. You've got an IGL who never was anyone. You've got a support who used to be all right if he was on the third best Danish team 5 years ago. And then you've got Headtrick, who really does, to Maui's point, look like he thinks like, right, I'm going to lose the game anyway, so I'll just sort of do my job in a sort of safe way. Like it's almost like he's literally running a HLTV rating calculator on the second monitor. Like, yeah, I've just got it to the 1.05. Like, cool, like back off, save. And then he just like makes his number look good so that he doesn't get fired and have to go back home. That's what this team fucking looks like. And the worst part about it all, to bring it all the way back, is this. What is Threat doing on this team? Like, I actually do think that is a guy, you can go listen to this guy, any episode or an interview, he's a very, very intelligent player about Counter-Strike. But I tell you what, I think he has the problem Blade has, which is they have like the in-game leaders mentality that can be really good if you've got good players, and it's terrible if you have bad players, which is they always view everything as a problem that has a solution if you keep looking enough. And the problem is, if you in this scenario, if you give them bad pieces, they will just bang their head against a wall forever trying to make that work. And so you've seen the reason why it's a killer is if you didn't know Threat was the coach of this team, you would never guess it from watching the in-game. Like you're saying, they don't have like the joke is, I might bang on Art from Furia. He still was coming up with innovative stuff. He was still doing something. Like, these teams always look like you don't even know who the IGL is sometimes in these teams. They don't ever look like they've got any like new shit on T side. There's nothing inspired or like cohesive. They don't have some like unique chemistry. They just do sort of last 6 months meta, and then they just have average players. And if you put all that in the equation, you should get the results they get. Their results are totally exactly what they should have. They're just an also run. That isn't good. And on the last thing I'll say on the config one is this. Even though people will know, I do think, like you said, Dempz, no matter what people think of as a player, one thing that never stops is he will always frag. If you just watch his crosshair, he actually just has crazy mechanics, guys. He will always shoot people in these games. His problem is he's not an intelligent player. That's why, if you ever hear me talk about config, I wanted him to be with Carrigan or Snappy or KD. Give him an IGL, basically, that would use him and would sort of be the brain for him and set the game up. This guy really is like, you have to use him like a fucking turret. You have to like send him to an area of the map that you want him to just kill people there while you're doing something else. He's not going to be like when Nico gets entry of the year, he's fucking decided all the shit he's doing. He's reading the game. Config is just a press W player. So if that's my best player, we're in fucking deep shit, especially when our IGL isn't brilliant, by the way. So to me, yeah, the whole team's just kind of like whatever in it at this point. The only good news is this. At least this team isn't a prison for anyone, as you said. Like they all the joke is they all deserve to be here. They all need to serve their time on an IP, and then with good behavior and the right sort of attitude and remorse for what they've done to be in an IP. But in many ways, Config, this is actually ironic. You did go to prison after all. It's just that because you're a CS pro player, your prison involves being paid a king's ransom and being fucking shit at the game still. So brilliant. Awesome how that works, isn't it?
The one guy that I feel like weirdly, I kind of gets overlooked on this team is like, I don't know what else DJL is really supposed to do, because I just feel like this is such a crazy problem-ridden team that when DJL first joined the roster as the coach, I actually could see market improvement on a couple of their maps, especially their T sides, because I feel like back in the day, everybody was like, these Hampus T sides are pretty whack, and there's not a lot going on with them. Then when DJL joined, it was like, oh, wow, this team is actually leaning on Overpass as their map to get a decent amount of T-side rounds, because DJL brought something into the structure that helped them just figure things out. But now it's just like, I look at the team and I'm like, man, there's like, I think you put it well with the whole like Threat sees this as like there's some way that you probably could squeeze 5% more out of every player. I feel like if that even happens, this team doesn't really considerably move in any meaningful direction upwards.
Yeah. Like, put it this way, here's the best way to frame it. What could ever change about this lineup that makes any player become a top 20 player? I can't even see what it would be. I can't even conceive of like a way that like I don't even know what the best case scenario would be. Like, how would you even change? It's one of the rare examples. That's why I say I sort of do low-key hate this team, because every other team I have some angle. I don't even know what piece I'd replace. I think like this really feels like a team you just wipe it clean and start over again. You know what I mean? You don't even pick like two players and repick. Like you just start over with a new squad.
Maybe their one chance is like a proper micromanage in-game leader. Because I think Headtrick's still got good mechanics. I think Config's got good mechanics.
Okay.
If you could get some like existence RPK like combination where he literally just like wore RPK like a suit to like frag out on people, then give me that. Give me like, I don't know, fucking tabseN. Let's get him off big, get him in nip. He can micro Headtrick and Config, and he's gonna bang. There you go. That's how you save that.
Basically, all you have to do, Maui, it's not hard. You just get existence to walk into RPK and then play in like whatever. Okay.
No, it was just a comparison.
Yeah, it's just a spitball. It's all good. It's all good.
Reach back in CS history and grab a comparison out.
And spoiler, yeah, obviously that plays to my angle, because my solution to every team is to have existence walk into someone and then just be in the team. So that does fix every single team in its history, jokingly, including existence's teams. Bang a reference to the majors there. Right, okay. Now we're going to go to my bad point. And mine's actually going to hit people with a bit of a surprise for this one, because it's sort of more of a macro point about certain scenes. Even though what's funny is when I reference this, people are going to think like, come on, man, why do you give a fuck about that? So you know it was announced very recently that the Brazilian player Steele, not the Canadian one, the Brazilian player Steele's announced his retirement. Now, obviously, everyone's going to go, yeah, but it wasn't relevant for years. He wasn't. Here's why that's bad. Because I actually do feel like if you know enough about the Brazilian scene, and I'm actually lucky enough that despite the reputation I might have, I actually am friends with people like Zeus is an obvious one. I won't say the names of the ones that were in SKM IBR, but spoiler, that's part of that's WWE guys. Those are all actually very friendly people in real life. So I've actually gotten to know quite a lot about their scene, and over the years I've been able to ask. So like when people would come along, like a Phelps or a Henny, I didn't have to wonder. I could sort of go and ask the other players, like, what is that guy's story? Like, what's his background? Does he care about the game? Does he play? And so I was able to find out some very interesting things. And basically it goes like this. I myself, when they first came along with that Luminosity team, got tricked like everyone. And when you saw the player Taco, everyone was like, well, the eye test is shit on this player, isn't it? Like, you watch it, and no joke, he really did look skill-wise like just a player that, like, I would queue up against if I went into, like, a Face It level 7 game or something. Like, that's who I would play. I wouldn't play... He wouldn't be on a top team, and his aim never looked sick. And then in the game, because at the time he'd gone to the top level, he was the one that looked like he was feeding, and everyone was like, kick this guy, get him off, get off. In fact, they were all like, get like a Phelps or a Henny, or usual, like, classic, you know, no role type, replace him with a high fragger type conversation. But what we all learned over time was, even though you could never argue he was like the key piece, because obviously he's a facilitating piece, that piece did end up being quite important to those lineups. And I don't think it's a coincidence, by the way, that when he left and went to Team Liquid, suddenly Team Liquid used to bang SK every fucking time they played them. Not like that's the one reason, but I do think that's a cohesive part that makes teams, it sort of shores up from the bottom end of the structure, a team that has star players. And so what I'm going to get to is this. If people don't know, Steele himself had tried to actually mold himself into that type of a player too. Also, Bolts did it. Obviously, Bolts did it when he was the direct replacement for Taco. I actually do think that is the one part in the Brazilian scene they have completely missed. They never understood, NA did this as well, players like a Taco. I mean, my analogy in NA would be they don't get players like Naf either. They only get aggressive fraggers or AWPers. That's it. They don't understand the other roles. And so the Brazilian scene, if you go and look right now, I was trying to do this a month ago. I'll probably have a video soon where I was trying to make like, what would like a super team of Brazilian players even look like now? And I made it as expansive as I could, Dempz. I tried to literally take like all the good players from Pain and fucking MIB. I tried to make a list of like 50 names. And bro, it's insane. If there's 50 names, then like, I'm going to tell you straight up, like 32 of them are just like aggressive riflers that have good stats. Like, you know, maybe like 2 are like up and coming AWPers, like fucking Insane or whatever. And then like, you know, a couple more. Oh, the joke is the rest are just all the players, you know, the ones that used to be in Immortals. And there are fuck all in-game leaders. And there are no support players that are like good, that actually can be like a perfecto type, but there's none. They don't exist. And so the reason I would say that Steele retiring is bad is, I actually think that's part of why Brazilian CS had this wave with this one core of players, and then it's never gone back there again, because the sad thing is, we know from like people like Keserato, they still produce the great players. Like Keserato, if he had a team built around him, and the joke is, people have said it, but I agree. I actually think he would have been better than coldzera. If you put the right team around him, his skills would have potentially given him that chance. And I don't say that as a mean feat, by the way. That's incredibly difficult to be that good. But he's never had a chance because his teams have never had this structure. They've never had all the roles. They've always had flaws in the roster. So in the Brazilian scene, it seems like for whatever reason, they just missed a trick on that one. They just don't essentially understand supportive elements, defensive play. They only know essentially the striker in football, as it were, or the other sick winger who dribbles around everyone. So I actually think it's kind of indicative of the Brazilian scene. Like, what did happen to Steele? He basically went to Team Liquid, he didn't like it, and then he just chilled on some side teams, and he was never relevant again. This player should have been sure. He should have been on a Fury or something like that. These are the pieces that I actually think would have rounded the team out. What's everyone else's thoughts? By the way, you can go the other way if you want on this one. Let's see.
I agree. You go, Mal. You go.
I think that I guess one player that they're trying to build up to be a little bit more, I don't know if I'd say supportive as a role, but he's just like a team player, is Skulls. I don't know if I really buy that just yet based off of what I've seen on Liquid, because he's had pretty varied results, but maybe there's something that's gonna pop off for him at some point, and maybe he's gonna be the difference maker. Either way, the Steele retiring and the whole like just no glory for support players seems to be, yeah, it's definitely where, for whatever reason, I think just the way people in certain regions just gravitate towards certain types of stars and then try to mold their game after them is almost too obvious. Where, I don't know, I guess like, yeah, North America is obviously terrible at this. Brazil, now, until you brought this up, I didn't really recognize that, yeah, they actually are pretty bad at it too, because you would expect somebody like Taco and even Steele to an extent would have been a little bit more storied as a player in that region. But for whatever reason, I mean, people, I think it's like these, probably if I have to like really shoot somewhere, like it's like these kind of individualistic cultures of like being the superhero star or whatever, like taking the last buzzer beater shot, and everybody wants to be that guy, as opposed to the guy that was like the third best player on the team and also played a vital role. So that's sort of a cultural thing. I think there maybe is a case for it that there's just not the best quality of players coming out from Brazil in general right now. When I look at some of the other teams out there now, it just seems like the scene has gotten a little bit weaker. And so I'm not exactly sure if that's why. But yeah, I think with Steele's career overall, like it is kind of weird how he sort of just fell off of a cliff. Like I know he was playing in Spain for a bit. Like I think
he was actually on Movistar as well. Yeah, briefly,
he was on Movistar for a bit.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a weird way where I guess he tried to extend his shelf life as a player, but unfortunately, once he really left,
the joke there being obviously he played with fucking Smooya, and then he was like, you know what, maybe I'll just hang up this CS shit. It's fucking garbage.
Oh, it was with that lineup.
I think he was briefly in that team. Yeah,
he was.
Yeah. I don't know where else to really take this one other than just like it's just support players and the lack of glory they'll always get is just kind of, it's almost like we should make sure that there's more superlatives for those kinds of roles, because obviously it's almost entirely based on the eye test. Like you cannot really always look at it just like one position, one player, and go one for one, even, because even the way that like Rops plays a certain spot versus like a Shush or whatever, it's just completely different. So like, and the resources and the amount of agency that he has in the moment is just like so different, and the team plays around that. So it's I think that should probably just be more of a point in terms of just like the community.
By the way, I actually think the point you're making there also, there's another thing, Dempsey. You can jump in on that too if you want. If you want the abstract, I actually think he's making a solid point there as well. That is the thing we definitely lack in Counter-Strike. We think of it as a game with loads of stats, but I actually think it's a bit more like American football, where if people don't know, a lot of the stats for defense just don't, there's not really like obvious ones you can use in that sport, whereas like offense, all the stats make sense and they're actually quite easy to grade people. I feel like in Counter-Strike, actually a lot of the stats are confusing for these sorts of players, Dempsey. I feel it's hard to read a stats screen if it is the support. Like he's saying, people don't know the difference between a Bianca that's left on his own and one that has help, for example. Like it just shows up on the screen, right?
I think that's part of the reason it's so hard, is because a lot of what the less glamorous roles in Counter-Strike are doing is being facilitative and supporting the people around you. So it doesn't, I mean, you can try with things like flash assists and stuff like that, but even then it only goes so far. Yeah, I massively agree. I think the eye test is one of the only ways to deal with support players, and also talking to people on their teams. And I think that's a big thing for me that I think I see as an in-game thing with Brazilian teams, is that they sell their support players out completely. They leave them out to drive. They leave them to anchor small sites with like no help. No one's anywhere near. Or on T sides, they're literally like, go, walk out. I'm not going to flash for you. Just go and walk out, get your head ripped off, and then I'll fucking, get the triple kill. I think that's part of the problem as well, is that like support players, watching Furia and watching poor drop on Furia, like, okay, he's not an absolutely incredible player, but I actually thought on eye test he wasn't that bad.
He did his job, mate. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, look at their team since he left, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like, actually, I was always impressed with him as an anchor on bomb sites. I actually thought, like, damn, he's got no fucking help, and he's just taken 3 on that bomb site hit. Like, yeah, when you leave your support player out to dry every single round, of course they're not going to look very good. And I think that might be like kind of symptomatic, because they don't appreciate that kind of supportive role culturally. It comes through on the server because he's just getting left to die constantly. He's getting left to get the 0.8 rating because there's nothing he can do about it. Nothing he can do.
Yes. I think that's even the perfect example, because by the way, the other one, obviously the other classic one on the other side of the world was obviously Inters on fucking old Gambit / Cloud9. Anytime people looked at the stats and like, he's got a 9.95 writ, it's like, watch the spot and you tell me what he's supposed to do differently. Like, the joke is, I have actually seen that guy. He's a perfect example of why stats don't count, by the way. I've seen that guy actually do like things that added value to a round that don't result in a kill or a death. Because sometimes it was just like really genius, like hold a spot or delay something. Like, these are things that'll never show up on a stat sheet. But if you watch the game, you go, fuck, that's the reason why, like, Shiro had time to rotate in a overpass B or what, like, people ignore those angles. Yeah, it's definitely this sort of play. Because I agree on the drop one. That was one of those ones where when they kicked him, that was like HLTV forum thinking of like, but if I had this player in with a better number, then they told it's like they were worse. They're actually worse now that they kicked him, guys, because the joke now became, who's the new, is it Shello? Is it fucking Art doing some of it? Like, they just tanks their game at that point in time. Right, let's move on then. So here, you've got a classic one here, Dempsey. What is your ugly point?
My ugly point is online play, but specifically in CS2. Because my god, like look, online play's always been a problem, right? There's always been like match fixing in lower levels. There's always been like cheating, online qualifiers and stuff like this. I don't know if it's just the awareness of it has exploded, or if there is actually a serious problem. But like even down to in Premiere, cheaters are rampant at the top of Premiere.
I mean, it's even implied. I've seen some of the clips, mate. Some of these clips from the literal major RMR qualifiers in Europe look like people are literally using wall hacks.
Oh yeah, no, there are definitely like some of them. Some of them are ridiculous. There's that one on Mirage where the guy's running around in front of a ramp, just like literally waiting until they go back, and then he gets a nade out and runs and throws it at them. Like, it's outrageously obvious. I don't know if it's gotten worse, because even like there are just accusations, like I'm not putting weight behind this Para team who got through to the RMR and who also got a Pro League spot. There's a lot of talk around them. We even had like in the open qualifiers, ridiculous stuff like teams thinking they're eliminated, and then like the day after, the admins are like banning this cheating thing. Like Koi,
right.
like Movistar got a lifeline because
Right.
they got eliminated, and then like a day later, the admins are like, "Oh, we've disqualified them. You're back in." Like it just. And the reason I use this as my ugly point is because I think it is really ugly. But at the same time, like part of what is so amazing about Counter-Strike is the amount of like openness we have to our circuit, that you can get these like, into the breach style storylines where a team can come through open qualifiers and like make it and, do that like, oh, friends, we won. Like they can do that cool storyline. But it is so ugly at the moment. Like there's so many scandalous like stories and clips and stuff that at this point, is it like a necessary evil, or should we just like really do our best to ditch online play?
I think for certain levels of tournaments, there just has to be more. There needs to we need to just put like webcams behind people or something. Honestly, I think the Paris stuff. I saw a few of the clips for that one, and so just remarking on that, like the guy was one of the players on the team. Let me try to find his name. Oh, Camion just had these clips that Kavem, who's like another tier 2 European player, uploaded about, and he just was missing so badly by timing. Like he was literally reacting to things happening on his screen seconds, literal seconds after they popped up on his screen. And it's just kind of like, and this team just beat Guild News Eagles to qualify for ESL Pro League, and it's just like I see the clips of him being horrible, and I'm like, this is I can't explain this at all. Like it's not even like lag. It's just literally the worst reaction time I've ever seen in my life. And then there's other.
Is it like that one back in the day when CLG Ricky had that one on LAN where he was sat there and there was someone on his screen? He was the AWPer as well, and the coach had to point like, "Yeah, that's a guy there, kill him." Because Richard never stopped going on. That was the greatest one of all time. Like, he's actually on the screen.
Yeah, there were just multiple instances that Kavem uploaded though that I was like, what is going on here? There were more clips of them also from these games versus Bad News Eagles, and the way that they would peak angles and just kind of like the way they would play defensively or offensively based basically off of like there's no way you could know these things. And it just was like a lot of perfect timings. And I will say like when I watched the first one or two, I was kind of like, this isn't that damning to me. But then I see more and more and I'm like, okay, it's really hard to explain this stuff.
It becomes a pattern at a point.
Yes, exactly. The game sense at a point is just unbelievable. And so I'm not going to make an official statement on the team because I mean I didn't actually watch the demos. I just saw a bunch of evidence put together around them. So the online stuff, and I've literally played Premiere yesterday. I played Premiere yesterday on stream, and I waited 15 minutes for a game, and this guy started just aim hacking literally in spawn, just killing us instantly every single time, and it was like, oh, okay. And so someone just instantly DC'd. No, it's a problem when you're above like 20,000 elo, that's for sure. I don't know if you're not running. I don't even know if the. Do you know Dempz were they playing on Faceit anti-cheat or what for the spot for Pro League?
Pro League, I don't know. Yeah, because I know they were using that Across anti-cheat for the RMR qualifiers, but I don't know what they were doing for Pro League. No.
Okay, well, either way, yeah, it does feel like because the game's new and cheaters are just abundant right now that I don't know if the anti-cheats have all caught up necessarily to everything people can do yet.
At pro level, it seems like radar/map hacking is like the really big problem at pro level, because I think it's a little bit easier to hide than looking at somebody through a wall. If you're just glancing at a map, like that's a little bit harder to like see by the way you're kind of moving your crosshair and stuff. And I wonder, I don't know the technicalities of it, or if it's harder for anti-cheat to deal with that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, what I would say is, like, first of all, I do think that, like, the fucking Across thing took way too much flack. Like, are we acting like VAC is fucking sick or something? I don't know why everyone's doing that. Like, what do you think the alternative was, guys? And then also, I'll just throw this in there. The thing I'm also mad disappointed about when I see these clips is, why is everyone so shit at cheating, you fucking morons? Like, the joke is you do have cheats. All you have to do is play normally 99% of the time and then pick, like, 3 spots to use it in. And then you get all the upside of cheating without it being obvious. Whereas, like we're saying, we're watching clips where like you're just the whole time playing as if like it's fine that you're playing like you don't know we can observe your POV. And when we do observe your POV and we have a radar, we can see that you have a radar as well. You can't, and can obviously see that you're moving in as they pull back. And when they push in, you magically take an off angle. Like, it's too obvious. It's actually amazing how bad these people are at cheating in these clips. Like, it's why I always told people, you can't really expect that if I say like a pro player cheats. It's not going to be like that. They're not going to make it blatant. The difference is the pro player, because he actually is good as well, he is just only going to like activate it in a 1v2 to know where the first guy's, and then he's going to play it out safe, you know, like, so like that's one thing that's really disappointing is how blatant it is. Like, because as we're saying, right, this is why, by the way, as a quick aside, that whole Loba thing of like, can you believe they're manually banning people? You moron. Literally, by your logic, if we run a tournament like this with an anti-cheat and the anti-cheat doesn't catch it because it's a new cheat, and with our eyes we can see the guy's just hacking his tits off, we're supposed to go, well, hands up, it'd be wrong for us to step in and ban it. That's what every tournament in the history of Counter-Strike that's an online qualifier does, by the way, because it leads into my second point, which is one thing they do for these tournaments that they kill themselves with every time, is we act like all online qualifiers are like uniformly important. Here's what I don't get. If it's like the IEM qualifier for Sydney, Dempz, right, and it's like some sort of okay mid-sized, I get it if that lasts 2 days, and if there's a fuck up on day one, we've just got to finish it. So if it goes till 6 a.m, it doesn't matter. In 2 days, we've got like, you know, it might be a pro league group or there might be a blaster. There's no time in the shit. When it's the major, we're only going to have 2 of these a year. Can we add like 2 days buffer either side on like the major qualifier? You know what I mean? Because then, as you're saying, the problem has always been, even if I catch the cheater, even if I manually review and see that they're cheating and remove them, what then happens to everyone they beat in the bracket? That's always the problem, isn't it? Because essentially there's no way to help those people. Even if you give one of them like the last one they beat the next spot, you still fuck over the 3 people they cheated before. So I would say, first of all, for the majors, as it only happens 2 times a year, add a couple of days so that if we need to, like, you know, have a bit of breathing room, we can do it. It's important enough. And then the other thing to me that's obvious is because I actually follow, as a fan, the sport tennis. Tennis nailed all these problems years ago, guys. If you're like a top 100 player, you don't have to go to a qualifier to go to Wimbledon. You get one of the seeded spots because the circuit is based on all the other tournaments accumulate your ranking, and then you get your spot. So my point is this. It's not that it has to be all a massive RMR on LAN or all a giant online open tournament. We can have tiers to this, surely. Like, maybe if you're a totally brand new team with no core and no ranking, you do have to go into a pure online qualifier with everyone, with Smoothie and his pals and Maui and some cheater in America. Maybe you have to go into the one that anyone can play in. But why the fuck, for example, would like some like fucking 29th best team in the world have to play against cheaters and run a crazy... Essentially, they have to just hope that not one person fucks them up with this bullshit as they go through, just to get to the normal tournament. Like, that person, to me, maybe they don't go straight to the RMR. I'm picking the 29th team here, so it wouldn't be like an obvious team that you'd invite. But there's got to be, can't there be like a tier between? Like, an obvious one to me would be, if you're someone like ESL who runs a big aspect of the circuit, can't you take like one of those challenger events and make that sort of like a half RMR, where it's like you take like, you know, teams 30 to 60, and then they qualify into this, and then from there you go 3 spots to an RMR. Essentially, any additional adding of LAN or separation of the best teams from the obvious cheaters is the way to go to me. Because the other thing that's outrageous is that it's one thing if some team, like that one that just said they had to disband because they didn't have any money, Dempsey, like Ixar, what the fuck. Yeah, there you go. Right, when they do that, guys, they're doing that for attention. Obviously, we all know they wouldn't have been at the RMR and they would never get a fucking sticker anyway. But the difference is, I think it sucks when they get fucked over, but it's not the end of the world. They weren't going to do anything at the major. The real problem with this is you will absolutely get real teams that could have been like an outside chance to make the major just get fucked in this online qualifier. And for what? Did it, like, that's not real Counter-Strike. That's not the Counter-Strike they were going to play at the major. And in this, and also there's the other reason, in my opinion, why I would also tier it, is it sounds counterintuitive, but actually the teams that are like 280 in the world play such radically different Counter-Strike, it actually can be hard to win against them. I know it sounds so weird to a fan, but that's not really what those guys train for. So what we tell them essentially, Dempsey, is train train every day of your life playing against Astralis, fucking Na'Vi, FaZe, train the proper meta, watch all the demos, all the smoke, and then now for the qualifier for the World Championship, the most important tournament, you have to go and play Bill and Ed down the street who don't even know any of that, and therefore all their wrong moves could actually fuck you up counterintuitively and maybe like cause the greatest upset of all time.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, I was just thinking it was just on your point about like the difference between the meta at the top and in lower tier CS. People always used to say that's why it was so hard playing against the Bulgarians, like 500 or Fiend or whatever they were, is because, you know, there was no fucking, they would just spread out in a default, 5 players on T side, and then they would pick one, like let's say one, clock goes 1 minute, all 5 of them peek you. Just all 5 of them just walk out and take a duel, and it's so hard to play against because like it's so different radically from the meta you're playing when you're playing against the top teams. So I agree with you. It's not only that you have to deal with potential cheaters or you have to deal with potential like fuckery, you know, the tournament fucks up and you have to play your qualifier at like 4 a.m. or something. But also, yeah, if you play against one of these actually fairly decent tier 2 teams with like, or tier 3 even, with like good mechanics and shit, yeah, they can fuck you on a bad day. And when it's best of 1, like, yeah, you know, like Heroic, for example, having to like fucking grind through these online qualifiers and pray that you get the glorious run where you don't play cheaters and you don't play some tier 3 team that fucking took all their Adderall this morning. Like,
here's the sad thing. That wouldn't have been as shocking if he didn't just like leave that as the last word there. It almost sounded like he was dropping that like a bomb. All their Adderall this one.
Oh, sorry. That was
No, it's all good.
Throwaway comment.
I know,
No accusations. No
it's all
specific
good.
accusations.
It's all good. Like, what is your... Yeah, go on. What's your ugly point, Maui?
Yeah, mine's a pretty serious topic that has been. I'll just get it out right. I think that people by now have seen that Cynic, formerly known as Sneaky, has passed away in the North American space, and there's no explicit message for cause of death, but I think Sempis heavily implied by his tweets and even his responses online that it was due to some kind of mental health crisis.
Oh, right. Okay. I mean, usually the fact that you don't mention makes it a bit conspicuous in that sense. Like, it's obviously some sensitive reason, right?
Yeah, I mean, Sempis retweeted things about like mental health
Oh,
stuff
right.
and everything like that on top of that, and he's one of the people that was closer to Cynic. And
okay. By the way, did you actually know this player, Maui? Like, was he someone in the scene when you were playing or when you were coming up or something?
Yes.
Because I'm not familiar with this player.
Yeah. I played against him when his name was still Sneaky a few times. And I'll just like say one thing. Like for some reason, this came out. A lot of people on their quote tweets or whatever were, you know, in their brief eulogies were saying things like, you know, Sneaky and I, or Cynic and I didn't always see eye to eye, which is kind of like, he was probably a little bit hard to get along with for a lot of people. Was he
flaming people or bantering or something? What was the angle?
Yeah, he flamed me before too.
Okay.
Like we were playing when I was in FPL for a bit in North America. I remember like I had like a really good hold on like B anchoring Mirage, and after the game, he told one of my teammates who was on his team, he's like, this Maui guy's just jumping like a fucking idiot or whatever. Cause I just had like watch like good, you know, like movements for like how to deploy like counter utility and shit like that, and just buy a lot of time for my teammates to rotate in as opposed to like just shooting everybody in the face. And yeah, he was had like a harsh way of putting things, but I also think that's probably why he was successful enough at the tier 2 level to get nouns into a lot of these deeper qualifiers, to make it to some international events. They obviously didn't have really big results once they got to those events, but he was clearly a talent in the North American space that not only was he an in-game leader, but he was also a pretty solid opper too. And in a space that's so devoid of good oppers, it's really such a tragedy to see this guy passing. And I just kind of want to really, not even really more about his player or who he was as that, but I think that just, it's unfortunately so common and possible for people that suck themselves into this space and try to compete to let their mental health really slip away from them as they're just grinding. Because unfortunately, even like as opposed to traditional sports where if you're practicing, you're seeing people all the time, you're socializing, you're out there, your body is literally saying this is good, I'm going to produce endorphins for you. With Counter-Strike and gaming in general, you're very frequently just behind your monitor, you're going to grind for unhealthy amounts of hours per day, and that is what it takes to get good at this stuff. But you really need an active support network that you're participating in and you're hopefully also like checking up on people around you too, because if there's some sort of pattern of behavior that is concerning, that should be that should be a warning signal for people that are around you. So I think that it's really up to people in this space to just make sure that the people that they're closest to, like I think it's very odd when kind of like public figures say, "Oh, you can message me." It's like, no, it's really not me who would be the person that you would talk to.
Yes.
It's the people that you're closest to, whether that is your teammates, family, friends, anybody. It's just gotta be the people that are closest to you. And also on top of that, yeah, there are professional help resources which I would recommend if you don't have anybody out there. But it's really like just making sure that you're checking in with everybody around you in this space especially feels so vital to its health when, as opposed to other competitive scenes, there is a lot more face-to-face interaction. But some people are just you're just behind your monitor day in, day out.
Obviously, you can choose what to say about this, Dempz. I don't know if you knew this player or not. It's up to you what you want to say.
No, I didn't know the player, but I would just like echo kind of what Maui says. I think there's such a propensity for what we do and what we enjoy, even to the point where like, gamer hours are like, ridiculous o'clock in the morning. That's when people are grinding and doing this, grinding their solo queue or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I think just being aware that we almost have to be even more mindful than others about like looking after our diet, making sure we're getting out and seeing some sunlight, getting a bit of exercise, make sure we're not just talking to people. It's great having a support network where you can hop onto a Discord call with your mates, but try and go and see some people face to face, man, because we're social creatures, human beings. Like we need that like physical interaction and contact and stuff. So yeah, just make sure you're looking after each other, guys. I think every time something like this happens, even if you don't know the person, you can still take something away from it. Like just give your mates a nudge, make sure they're all right, and yeah, look after each other.
But basically, so I would make more of a point about the abstract, about like mental health or whatever. So firstly, I actually think Maui made a very, very important there, which is, even though I know people are well-intentioned, so I don't get mad at it, I'm not one of those people who gets triggered about that shit, but I do think people who say, you can reach out to me anytime, you have fundamentally misunderstood this entire equation, because what you're doing is, you aren't someone who is in mental trouble/strife. So you're thinking like you are now, where you're comfortable and you are in a normal situation where there wouldn't be some weird like pressure, or it wouldn't feel strange to ask someone. You wouldn't think, for example, well, I'm a piece of shit and my life is worthless, so I'm going to be a burden to my friend. You wouldn't think that way. So as a result, you can't actually undo it. That's how he might be thinking. In this particular case, people who themselves have low self-esteem or are in a bad mental place, often, like I just alluded there, don't want to burden people they care about. They will actually think essentially like, I should just keep this shit to myself, because like they're having a good life. In fact, if the other person's life's going awesome, they'll feel even more so like, I should just keep my shit away. I'm poisoning me. So in this case, if instead in that dynamic, the other person whose life seems to be going great was the one to reach out, that is where the person might be able to open up or feel like, all right. So actually, because then the part you're forgetting is, yeah, but that's your friend who cares about you. So there is a reason they would want to. So I do feel like actually just even the gesture of reaching out can be a massive... I think that can give people almost a sense of like comfort, or even if they don't actually message you, just the idea that they know that is a door that's open and that you wouldn't feel like they were pressing anything upon you or making you be a part of their bullshit. If you make it sure that you care about them and you essentially, I'm here if you need me, etc., I think that is big. And then also to me, I think that it is massively misunderstood that people who are top pros in this game do sometimes lack this support network, because we're all gamers and everyone's a nerd and everyone's, especially when they're off in team houses or they're living away on their own. Like, you really do, at the level this guy was playing, you really do just sit at your PC all day. So it's like the online area. You play a million online qualifiers, a million online. You're not outside with people. You're not having the everyday, like, oh, hello to the baker, and then the guy who's your post. You're not doing any of that shit. Like, you're the guy where the joke is, you get mad at the Uber Eats guy because he's here 5 minutes late and you're waiting for the queue to pop for the next game. Like, that's your fucking life in this world. So in that kind of a scenario, first of all, every day is going to blur into one. You're not going to have like a natural circadian rhythm of like, I do this in the day and then I do my exercise and you're not going to have any balance. You're just going to be going hard at the game. If everyone knows, people at this level grind. They grind all the time. If they're not playing the qualifiers and all the matches, then they're playing all the face-it games and the pogs, trying to get people's attention. So the grind is crazy. Like, I would compare being that level of pro player to those stories you hear about people who go to like Los Angeles to become an actor and then they're just grinding away for years and you never hear of some of them. But you might think, oh, they just tried and didn't make it. It's like, them not making it was a whole story, mate. It was a whole saga we don't even know about. And then what I would also say is this. I think a really misunderstood thing is the reason why you'll get some pro who's like a mega nerd, but then they're really arrogant. It's because what pros do is because they've put their whole life into the game, they tend to identify themselves with their ability at the game. And when it comes to the pro level, it's even worse. Because here's the difference. I'll give you an example. Even though you or I might think someone like Serato probably should be feeling awesome, he's fucking sick. Then, even the fact he's good, well, now then the team results take over. So now if the team results are bad, it doesn't matter how well you do. That's going to make you bummed out. So I don't think people realize, like, when you put your whole identity into I'm good at this game, and then either the game tells you you are at the moment or the results aren't there, you're going to feel like it's going to have a knock-on effect. Like, who am I? What am I doing with my life? Like, am I wasting it away? Is there any purposes? Am I going to be banging my head against the wall for 5 years to come? So I feel like people miss that, like, two things I think every human needs is, one, they need a real support network. It can't just be, by the way, your team. I said this on the Cassard one back when we talked previously about, like, orgs giving support. It's a good idea, but I also don't think that is the first person who should be giving the support. They should be doing the professional level. Like, for example, if you need time off or you need a sports psychologist to talk, that's okay. The idea they take care of you as like a human, I would hope you have a real life support network of friends, of family, of like a significant other potentially who can take care of your real needs and aren't just in the esports space. Because also, by the way, there's an obvious conflict of interest there, isn't there? If I'm your team org coach or owner and my job's on the line if we do badly in this next tournament, am I always going to be the nicest guy ever to you and helping you with, maybe actually I have to put, maybe I'm got issues myself and I'm going to be fired if we fail the next time, so I have to push you harder. Like, that isn't the guy I want to be in charge of your mental health, guys. Sometimes he might even be incentivized to say we're all going to burn out, or, you know, essentially hell or high water, we're going to make this major or we're not. So yeah, the last thing I would say is, I also think that's why the whole thing of like identifying how good you are is if you put everything into being good at the game and you think you aren't, you actually will think you have no purpose in life. It might sound counterintuitive because to a fan, you're like, you make money though, and you're doing my dream, and you're so close, you're in the RMR, you've almost made it. Like, no, maybe not. Maybe to that person, it's even crueler. Maybe they think they got that close and they didn't get into the big time where they wanted to be. So I think all that stuff, because we glamorize the idea it's so sick to be a pro, and so people miss that, like, not only are you human, in some ways you have actually harder problems than just a random Joe in the street. Like, he does have his family, he does have like a way to disengage from work. By the way, the average Joe, his boss might put pressure on him because he didn't do awesome in his performance. He's not probably beating himself up that he's like 97 percentile, you know what I mean? Like, being a pro player is brutal, guys. So I think we all do that thing of like, they're just playing pros making loads of money. It's like, they are, but there's so much more comes with it. The baggage is crazy. And even though I might myself seem harsh, if you know behind the scenes some of the stories of these guys, they do deal with way more, especially in the mental and like self-esteem domain, than any of us can really like give credit. I mean, I would say that's one area where we don't even have to do that as much. Like, me and Maui might get hated on for having like an opinion people don't like, but it's not like every single time we do an event, it's like we ourselves have to feel, oh, I'm a piece of shit and I failed. Like, no, I can't even imagine that world. I wouldn't want to be a part of a scene like that personally. So God bless everyone who's in it, but I do think everyone needs to level their game up. Because I would just bring it back to the beginning. It can be as simple as just get ahead of the problem. If people actually do reach out and make sure people are okay, and you actually do have real conversations, sometimes in private, it's not always appropriate to have it publicly. It doesn't always have to be a twit longer as well. I do think that is actually how you sort of stop these, I don't know in this particular case what happened, but you stop potential tragedies where people, they are too far gone, but no one knows. Because I think that's the tragedy beyond just a person losing their life, is it's when you didn't even know it was that bad and you thought, oh, that person was just having like a bad week or whatever. And then you find out later it was like the end for them. Just like maybe that was the absolute limit they were pushed to. So I would say it's just a really complicated topic. But yeah, it's obviously always more we can all do. Leave it at that. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Oh, actually, there's mine. I just realized we didn't do my point.
Yeah, you have
my
your
point.
point.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Here's what I'm going to pick for my ugly point. I'm actually going to really put everyone's feet to the fire now. Because what I'm going to say is this. It's just going to be, the ugly point is the potential. Listen to how this is phrased, Dempz. This is very key. It's the potential of this Falcons lineup. And notice I said potential of this Falcons lineup. Now, the reason I say that, and it's in the ugly category, is because of this blast, most people are going to go, you know, it was overhyped. Like, what it didn't get done what I hoped it would. You know, it's even lost to Astralis, who's also a new lineup right out the gate. They didn't get the win over Vitality. They couldn't close it out. They didn't have the firepower if people saw the game. Z was just way better than any of their players. So I think a lot of people are going to be out on this team. Even though I'm sort of in, it's ugly as well for me, Dempz, because I also can see many ways this could not work. I could see ways it doesn't quite live up to the billing. I could see ways where it even potentially degrades some of the reputation of the players. But I also do feel like, I do think there's crazy potential, but that's why I put it in ugly. I feel like it's not obvious. It's not obvious this will work, actually. I want to know where everyone is on this one. I feel like now's the perfect time to get everyone's take. Where is Falcons and where do you expect them to be? What do you think, Dempz?
My problem with Falcons in their current iteration is actually firepower. I think, like, Madden obviously isn't like the craziest frag or whatever, but he's there to do some of the ugly stuff, so I get it. Magisk, like, he was really good last year. He's definitely got like legs. It's not as if he's like washed or anything. Definitely not as a player. Still can have big games and stuff. And he's one of the most unique in terms of how like flexible he is. I think that's what makes Magisk like almost irreplaceable. Is he's such a flexible player. He can do so much. But like, who's like meant to be like really fragging out, like really like all the time, regularly? Are you asking Magisk to do that all the time? I don't know if he's got that in his locker anymore. Pius, yeah, I think he's really good, massively improved last year, but he was pretty shaky towards the end of last year, like with CS2 and the changeover, and once Ents were kind of out of their purple patch. Boros, I just don't know if he'll ever get there. I think he has a lot to work on in decision making, and he just looks like a pug star when he's playing pro games. He looks out of place a lot of the time. He's obviously mechanically very fucking gifted, but I don't see where the firepower is going to come from consistently with Falcons. That's what makes me think like, I like the pieces. I kind of see what we're doing with this roster, but I think it's a move at least away from being able to do what the ambition is going to be behind this Falcons lineup.
I think the one question mark is still just Boros for me. I feel like so much of their ceiling relies on this guy replicating anything that he was able to do with Monty back at the major. As of what I saw so far at the Blast, the spring groups, I haven't really seen anything that has resembled that. Sure, he was able to farm OG, and that's why his rating is even kind of in some way passable. But when you look at how he did against Astralis and Vitality, he was pretty damn bad. He was pretty horrible, actually. And yeah, a lot of that does come down to decision making. And I just feel like it was so abundantly clear from what Monty said about Boros after they replaced him with, I think it was Krasnow or somebody, whatever, whoever they got. Instead of Boros, it was like, oh, we can actually play normal CS now. Like, we can actually play with normal strategies now because we're not just hamstrung.
And by the way, technically, Monty was better afterwards. If you look at their runs, they actually got loads of wins without him. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they literally just improved after Boros left because he did. I was skeptical when they first said it. I think they said it at Cologne last year, and I was kind of like, I'll see it when I believe it. And I believed it after 2 maps. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you guys are actually slowing rounds down about now. You're actually mid-rounding much better, and you're not just throwing caution to the wind and just hoping Boros go kill works, because this guy doesn't seem like he has what it takes to just contribute in a system that something like Snappy would build. I mean, the thing is, you got 2 guys that we have thrown so much praise at for how they are able to make things work in both Snappy and Zonic. So it's like, I would assume if anybody can reach them, it has to be those 2. But if then they can't reach him, I don't think Boros should probably. I don't know where he goes. Like, I just think he probably should just continue farming in tier 1.5, tier 2. And this is basically in a weird way, even though this is his first real tier 1 team. In another way, this is for me Boros' last chance. Like, he can't if he fucks this up. Who's gonna look at him and be like, I can do better than Snappy and Zonic? No, no one should probably think that they would want to take that task upon themselves. So yeah, he's a big ceiling limiter for me for this team. He's also the person that can make their ceiling incredibly high. But yeah, as it stands right now, very disappointing from him. I think this team though, it is kind of an if, but like if they get someone that's a little bit more manageable than Boros, and like, kind of, for example, what I hope Patsy would be, or like what a Yakindar would be, or something like that, I think that makes sense. I also think the positioning for Boros made no sense to me at all. Like, I didn't get why he was anchoring on the A bomb site of Ancient.
That made no sense.
Wait, why? Yeah, why is he playing anchor spots? Just throw this guy into the action every single round and don't let him have to make any decisions after 30 seconds. Like, please just let him just keep doing what he was doing on Monty because like whereas like sometimes we feel like certain entry fraggers that really popped off due to their mechanics, like say Yakindar, say Config, they have a harder time in the mid late round. Like I think Boros is just worthless in the mid late round. It's the steepest drop off in like the first 30 seconds of a round to the final minute of a round I've seen in practically any player. So just make sure he gets a multi-frag or dies. Like I don't want just he'll fuck up the round for you in some magical way. Just don't let him go beyond that first 30.
I agree completely. Like on CT side, just send him out for info somewhere in the first 30 seconds. On T side, just, you know, throw a flash for him, let him go and try and multi-frag. But yeah, it's this guy's, like, if I was criticizing Config's decision making earlier in the episode, this Boros's is so bad. It feels like if he can't find someone in his crosshair within about 30 seconds, he's just lost. He's just completely lost.
For people who don't know, at the time of recording, Falcons has already been eliminated in Blast, basically. It's where they've already lost to Astralis and to Vitality. So what I would say is, I'll just make my final comment. I'll actually give my comment on having seen them play some games now, so it's not just purely hypothetical. I actually think this is where I feel like I took a really different take to everyone else. Because, like I say, I think a lot of people, especially the Astralis one, because Astralis themselves is new, I think a lot of people saw Astralis and, well, they look good. And what the hell? Falcons wasn't even in the game. It's like, yeah, but of the two teams, it's totally logical that it would be Falcons that would suffer and Astralis that would do. Astralis is the one with just the star players, you idiots. They essentially just drop them in and you hope you have a DM and you shoot people. Falcons, their whole strength is the Ents core, but they don't have the Nerds player anymore. So, if anything, they're not immediately going to instantly integrate Boros into their core, are they? Like, they haven't played with this player. In fact, seemingly he's never played in this type of a team before. So, to me, it's way more obvious that a team without crazy firepower wouldn't start with a crazy upset, and that actually, like, they're going to need to have the team. I was just hoping that core would walk in with the synergy. That hasn't quite gone there. I will say, in the Vitality game, I thought they were actually, as much as that game looks not that great on the scoreboard, they were actually coming back towards the end of that one. There was a couple of games rounds on Anubis, they almost won there. They were actually even starting to start fragging and stuff. But you can just see they don't have like the craziest roster. They're trying to get like the core together and bring that aspect together. And also, you have to remember, I'm sure Zonic and Snappy aren't like identically aligned on how they think of the game. That's going to take some time to figure out. There's some negotiation there. So to me, I actually thought what we saw in the initial opening, bearing in mind, by the way, we already hyped on a past episode Astralis might actually end up just being like a top 5 team, guys. They actually have a lot of potential. So when I look at the two teams you've lost to, I don't think there's no panic stations for me. I actually thought this was perfectly fine as now. And yeah, you might hope for a bit more. Maybe you hope, you know, you sort of just can run immediately. But I thought actually for the initial sort of like in this analogy to crawling before you walk, I thought they did all right. They looked okay.
I thought these were like the right games for them to have as well, because I think it did kind of show to you it's like the area they're going to probably lack a little bit right now is firepower. You need to learn to wield the unstable nuke that is Boros that could just go off in your hands, or if you drop it in the enemy's laps, then it can work. So I think, yeah, it was exactly what you'd expect to see against these types of teams. Like there is some team structure there. There is like a concept you can see on the server where it's like, okay, yeah, after a month or two, maybe we're cooking here. But yeah, the firepower is going to be the question mark, I think.